Episode 2, Floating Between Truth and Fantasy. Chapter 1, Rooftop with a Borrowed Sky. The rooftop opened like a borrowed sky above the city. Strings of lights, a bar improvised from plywood and linen, sculptures that looked like punctuation marks left by a giant. Lena came for the art in the wind. She arrived in a slinky navy dress that behaved like good lighting, her hair pinned as if the evening were a soft promise. The trio played slow bossa near a wall of greenery. People talked in bright, lifted tones, balancing glasses and opinions. He found her near the piece everyone was pretending to understand, an aluminum kite anchored by invisible thread. "It wants to fly responsibly," he said, dimples precise, tie loose enough to look like a decision. "And succeed at parties," she replied, smiling. "Adrian," he offered, design consultant, Libra if you believe in choreography. "Lena," she said, curator, Gemini if you believe in weather. They laughed, easy as a well-rehearsed duet. Air signs clock each other fast, the angle of humor, the velocity of banter. He asked about her show, she asked about his favorite bridges. They made metaphors leap across topics like stepping stones, color as etiquette, proportion as ethics, flirtation as urban planning. They migrated to the railing where the city spread like a mirror that had learned to glow. The wind tugged his cuff, she smoothed it without thinking. He tilted his head when she spoke, that Libra hallmark of calibrated attention, and she felt seen in the exact, flattering way a portrait chooses a subject. When the rain arrived, those polite early drops that asked permission, Adrian produced an umbrella with theatrical indignation. They huddled under it, faces nearer than either of them pretended to notice. "Do you always carry props?" she teased. "Only the ones that improve exits," he said, and the thunder agreed from a thoughtful distance. They lingered to the end, helping stack folding chairs as the band packed up. He walked her to the elevator, the umbrella became their shared roof. "Coffee that turns into something else," he offered. "Tomorrow," she said, surprised by her own willingness to schedule delight. In the lobby mirror, they looked like a possible future, complementary silhouettes, laughter rising in the same places. The elevator doors opened. He touched her elbow, light as punctuation. She stepped inside, turned, held his gaze for a full, unblinking beat. On the ride down, she exhaled the kind of breath you only notice when it's been stolen. Her phone vibrated, a photo from the rooftop sent by a friend. Her and Adrian caught mid-laugh, city behind them like a benevolent chorus. She saved it before replying. Outside, the rain found its confidence. She walked briskly, shoes clicking an optimistic meter. Tomorrow meant coffee, coffee meant conversation. Conversation with Adrian had felt like dancing without the risk of stepping on anyone. No interrogations, no ledgers, just a buoyant sense of being carried and carrying back. At home, she opened windows to the smell of wet stone. She replayed their jokes, their easy volley, the umbrella as an excuse to share climate. Something about him felt well-drafted, the kind of man who irons his shirts and his sentences. That steadiness, without Scorpio's deep-sea pressure, felt like relief. Before sleep, she typed a note in her phone. "Air can lift, not only scatter." It read like advice from another version of herself. She put the phone face down, watched the room dim, listened to rain knock lightly on the pane as if it had known them on the roof and wanted to follow the story home. Chapter 2, Coffee that Behaved Like Champagne. They met at a cafe that understood chairs the way a tailor understands shoulders. Adrian had already claimed a table in the window and 2 croissants that looked like golden commas. "We'll add clauses as needed," he said, tapping the pastry bag. Conversation filled the room around them. Theirs formed a clear channel through it, topic to tangent to callback with gliding precision. Family myths, favorite fonts, the ethics of reclaimed wood, the worst museum labels either had read, see object. He quoted a line from a Polish poet. She countered with one from a catalog essay. They both loved the way a well-placed semicolon could save a thought from melodrama. Lena kept catching the thought, he makes attention feel weightless. Adrian made room without conceding, invited without demanding. When she told a story, he amplified. When he told one, he tucked it into a shape she could hold. It was flirtation as considerate architecture. They wandered afterward, a soft noon arranging itself around their pace. At a bookstore, they competed for the most persuasive first lines. In a park, they chose favorite dogs by gait and optimism. A vendor sold them paper cones of roasted nuts, and they ate with fingers they pretended not to notice. He took her hand as they crossed a street, not proprietary, not timid, just a social grace extended to traffic and unexpectedly to the electricity running up her arm. She didn't pull away. "So," he said, glancing at her. "Team rooftop again tonight. A friend hosts movie nights on a terrace with blankets and an irresponsible projector." "Rooftops are having a season," she said. "Yes." Evening brought a view stitched with window light. The movie sound wandered, but the moon was generous, the blankets warmer than they looked. Her shoulder found his arm found the logic of being there. They whispered running commentary, her line readings, his sly edits. When the projector hiccuped and the screen went to stars, the terrace sighed. Someone clapped the way humans clap for weather. Adrian looked at her mouth, then her eyes, careful, asking. She answered by closing the margin between them. The kiss was crisp, smiling, a first chapter kiss that knows there are pages ahead. When they broke, he rested his forehead to hers, the small, old gesture that says, let's not rush what we're already doing quickly. Back at her door later, the air was the kind that persuades you to extend goodbyes. He didn't try to script the night past its natural cadence. Sunday museum, he asked. Dangerous, she said. I have a history with museums. Then we'll choose corridors with guardrails, he replied, dimples filing a permit. She touched his collar, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle. You're very aligned. I believe in level, he said, and in a little tilt when the view demands it. They kissed again, longer, warmer, still careful with the glassware. When he left, she leaned her back to the door and let a small teenage grin have the room. Coffee that behaved like champagne and an umbrella that had upgraded to canopy. The metaphor stack grew, and for once she didn't mind cliché. Some beginnings deserve it. In bed, she remembered the Scorpio gravity that had both thrilled and pressed, and she felt her ribs widen with gratitude for air. Not empty buoyant, not evasive elegant. She slept without a middle-of-the-night question in sight. Chapter 3: A Social Bloom. Air signs tend to collect people the way trees collect birds, briefly, beautifully, with music. Weeks unfurled as a calendar of invitations. They hosted a small dinner with mismatched plates and perfectly matched playlists. They crashed a gallery talk and asked the only questions that made the artist laugh. They found a trivia team and lost elegantly. Lena noticed the choreography. Adrian knew where to stand in a crowded room, how to tilt a conversation towards someone who hadn't spoken, when to retreat to the bar and return with exactly the right drink a person had just wished for without saying so. With him, her sparkle felt sustainable, not defensive. Their intimacy built on a cadence of lightness anchoring into heat. They learned each other's maps with a patience that still felt playful. Even in private, the atmosphere was more champagne than whiskey, bubbles not burned, sparkle not smoke. They undressed one another as if curating an exhibit of softness, unhurried, appreciative, a tour with reverent captions. Kisses multiplied into paragraphs, hands sketched slow, certain lines, bodies synced to a tempo that respected breath as much as hunger. She loved that he narrated consent in small, elegant phrases, here, like this, still good, and that he seemed to take pleasure in her yeses as if each were a design choice that improved the whole. He loved that she met him with responsive joy, that she laughed into his neck at the exact moment laughter made heat warmer, not cooler. Afterward, they sprawled in satisfied geometry, exchanging small truths, the embarrassing nickname a cousin gave him, her habit of rearranging hotel furniture for better flow. He stroked her arm in the absent-minded rhythm of someone sketching in the air. And yet, beneath the social bloom, a delicate avoidance took root. When a moment invited depth, they danced to the edge and pivoted. He told stories with polished surfaces, the emotional grain sealed under varnish. She, chastened by the heavy intensity of her last love, told herself not every connection needed excavation. Sometimes you could picnic on the meadow without mapping the cave. The night came when she almost said, "What scares you lately?" The words perched, wings ready. He beat her to speech with, "Would you rather live in a glass house in a forest or a brick house in a city?" She laughed, answered, forgot her question on purpose. Friends adored them as a set, photos collected, their heads together over pasta, Lena laughing mid-gesture, Adrian carrying 6 folding chairs like a friendly centaur. In one picture, he's looking at her while she looks at someone else. The photo glows with a composed kind of tenderness. They took a weekend train to the coast, pressed foreheads to the compartment window, made seashell puns that would have embarrassed other people. In the hotel room, the bed faced a balcony. The night pressed a soundtrack of waves against the glass. Their bodies found the slow tide in that music, meeting and withdrawing in rhythms that left both of them fluent and hushed. When she shivered, he tightened his hold. When he exhaled a little groan, she kissed him there as if signing a receipt. Morning brought gulls and room service coffee. He drew a heart in a fogged panel of the window like a well-beaved teenager. She traced it with a fingertip, smiled. Depth stayed offshore, visible as a darker blue line beyond the breakers. Neither swam for it. The day sparkled. They let it. Chapter 4: The Polite Edges of Avoidance. Avoidance, when elegant, can pass for balance. They perfected it together, 2 clever people stepping around soft hazards as if they were protecting a rug. A text went unanswered. "I assumed you were napping." A sharp aside at a party. "We'll call that a jazz note." Her lingering worry about a work conflict. "Sleep on it, the line will straighten." His hesitance when she mentioned meeting her brother. "Let me pick the wine, will be charming." When a small jealousy brushed the room, someone flirting with Adrian, a message popping on Lena's screen, they smiled it away, then touched in the kitchen while the risotto rested, the way some couples pour water on a candle with their palms. The flame hissed, the room smelled nice, no one asked if the wick was shortening. Intimacy continued tender and satisfying. The physical language between them grew nuanced, the way he paused to admire her out loud before kissing her shoulder, the way she slowed to breathe against his wrist like a vow spoken in a dialect only their skin understood. They discovered new cadences, a playful afternoon unspooling into a long, quiet evening, a morning that began with the kind of unhurried closeness that sets the tone of a day without demanding anything from it. Heat was there, real, generous, but it was framed by charm, staged by consideration. One night post-dinner, she almost told him about the way fear sometimes snapped at her heels, leftover thunder from the Scorpio storm. She wanted to say, "I freeze when I feel watched too closely, I shrink when I feel unseen." Instead, he poured Sauterne and said, "To equilibrium," and they clinked their glasses with a relief that felt like applause. He offered stories with beautiful transitions and few unflattering details. She suspected depths layered under that polish, old disappointments, the kind that teach a person to triangulate every conversation toward pleasantness. But the moment to ask kept slipping, as if the question itself were poorly designed. On a Sunday museum date, they stood before a painting with held faces, saturated blues. "It's about intimacy without confession," he said, pleased with his diagnosis. "Maybe it's about confession without intimacy," she countered, then wished she hadn't. He kissed her temple. "Let's not arm wrestle art," he whispered, and the sweetness in it, his desire to keep the day unwrinkled, made her go quiet. Later in his kitchen, they laughed over burnt toast, ate strawberries with their fingers, let the counter become a geography of yes. With him, pleasure felt curated, light-dimmed, music-tuned, compliments perfectly beveled. She melted under it, grateful. And somewhere a small ache woke, stretched and waited, the way a cat waits on a windowsill for a bird that may never land. That night she dreamed of the sea, bright on the surface, darker as you looked down. She woke wanting to swim and also wanting a lifeguard's whistle. Adrian slept beside her on his back, hand over his chest as if agreeing in advance with someone. She turned toward him, kissed the center of his palm, and let the wish dissolve on her tongue before it became a request. Chapter 5: Hairline Cracks in the Glass. A hairline crack is invisible until light hits it right. The first flare came at a birthday dinner, 12 people, glitter candles, clinking. Lena told a story about a disastrous shipment of sculptures. Adrian gently redirected near the punchline, gilding her ending with a smoother resolution than she'd lived. Laughter landed. She smiled, the good sport smile. Later, on the walk home, she said, "You rewrote my story." "I improved the arc," he said, affectionate, oblivious. It played. But it wasn't true. He slowed, hands in his pockets. Does it matter? The feeling was true. She let it go, or said she did. The crack took note. Another light strike, she asked if he wanted to come to family lunch. He hesitated, one beat too long. "I'd love to, but there's an open studio I promised I'd hit." She nodded. He brought pastries later, described the studios, kissed her neck in the doorway, made the afternoon golden. The lunch became one more thing that had happened without him. A third glint, he met an old friend of hers, Cuba, a playwright with an irreverent grin. The conversation sparkled until a quiet halt arrived. Cuba asked Adrian what scared him these days. "Dead air at a presentation," Adrian said smoothly. Cuba waited for the deeper version. Adrian poured more wine. The moment rebalanced into charm. Lena laughed along. The crack learned their lighting again. In bed, their bodies still met like practiced dancers who enjoyed practice. Heat didn't falter, tenderness didn't shy. But afterward, when the long breath arrived, she found herself wanting to say something unpretty and couldn't locate the grammar. He stroked her back, murmured something sweet about her shoulder blades being his favorite parentheses. She loved the sentence even as some part of her sighed for the paragraph that never came. A week later, scheduling friction, her text, "Can we talk Thursday? Something's buzzing." His reply fast, "Absolutely. Also, do you prefer the blue or the terracotta planters for your balcony?" She sent a heart, then stared at the screen, amused and slightly adrift. When Thursday came, they had tickets. They held hands in a dark theater while a play about silence made beautiful silhouettes of other people's confessions. After Under Street Lamps, she started, "Sometimes I feel." He kissed her to stop the tremble that had crept into her voice. It was a kind kiss, protective, well-timed, thorough. She accepted it gratefully and rescented it in a thin, translucent layer she filed under later. Air can carry, it can also thin out. The hairline crack didn't break anything. It simply kept reflecting light back at them in ways that made both squint. Chapter 6: The Conversation They Almost Had. They set aside a night, no plans, no people, just them. Adrian cooked lemon pasta. Lena brought wine and a vow to say what she meant without wrapping it in ribbon. She helped with the zest, the room alive with a scent that made arguments seem impossible. Dinner was lovely on purpose. They drifted to the sofa, knees touching, the city outside practicing its evening scales. He kissed her, and the kiss did that thing theirs often did, resolved tension by transmuting it into warmth. She put her hand to his chest to hold the moment still. "Can we talk a bit first?" "Please." He folded into listening posture, shoulders open, eyes kind. She tried. "Sometimes with us I feel curated, like we're always in the well-lit version of the room I want." "Mess," he offered gently, smiling. "Not mess exactly, texture, the underside. I want to know what you hold back to keep everything smooth." He breathed in, out, bought time. I don't hold back, I optimize. Why rehearse pain? Because it exists, she said, soft, and when we skip it, I feel a little unseen. He reached for her hand. I see you, he said, sincere. I see the way you chase air, the way you make a space brighter without hogging the light. I see how brave you've been about trust. He kissed her palm. The words were lovely and somehow beside the point. She nodded, heat in her eyes that wasn't pleased. What scares you lately? She tried again. He opened his mouth, closed it, laughed a little. Dead air at a presentation, he said, then caught himself, contrite. Sorry, habit. Okay, she said, and the word packed a small suitcase. They kissed as if apologies could be translated by mouth. They undressed each other with tenderness bordering on reverence. In bed, he asked with his usual grace. She answered with unmistakable wanting, and together they made something slow and thorough that would have convinced any witness they had done the hard talk already. Her spine arched to his hand, his breath caught at her whispered yes. The room altered its temperature to accommodate them. Their bodies were eloquent, the rest stayed pending. After they lay in the hush that should have been a bridge, she put her head on his chest. He stroked her hair. You and I are good at joy, he said finally, as if submitting a thesis. We are, she agreed. She said nothing about how joy without shadow eventually feels like stage lights, hot, flattening, blinding. He fell asleep first. She watched the ceiling as if it might scroll answers, then got up to pour water and stand at the window. The city glittered, discreet and busy. A couple argued in muffled laughter across the courtyard. She pressed her forehead to the glass. Her reflection did not confess, it only continued to exist. When she returned to bed, Adrian rolled toward her and held her in that careful way he had, precise as a well-made chair. Supported, she slept. Seen, she did not. Chapter 7. When the Wind Shifts. Conflict finally arrived wearing a small coat. He rescheduled a plan last minute for a client mixer. She had rearranged her day to make the evening open. She said it was fine. It was not fine. They met late anyway after the mixer in a bar that traded in dimness. He was equal parts apologetic and charming. She was equal parts gracious and brittle. Tell me about it, she said, meaning, tell me everything. He summarized connections, a promising project, a funny mishap with a name tag. She waited for the part where he said he'd missed her in a way that sounded like an ache. He waited for her to say she was proud. They both delivered their lines. Back at her place, the air felt oddly structured, like a room drawn to scale without furniture. He kissed her, she answered, because habit and affection are persuasive. Their bodies still found the choreography, but some step was off by half a beat. When she closed her eyes, an unexpected loneliness crept in, not from him exactly, but from the conversation they weren't having. She pulled back, hand on his chest. Can we pause? Of course, he said instantly, sweet and careful. I feel like I'm waving from the surface, she said, voice steady. I keep trying to dive and bumping into glass. He took a breath, let it out. I don't want us to drown, he said. Depth can be a whirlpool. It can also be a dock, she said. They sat with it, the unspectacular stalemate that ruins fewer people than fire but lingers longer. He suggested a weekend away. She suggested a walk now. They took the walk. They held hands. They said nothing that risked a bruise. At a corner, wind found them, one of those late-night gusts that feels like advice. Lena thought of the Libra scales, how they balance by adjusting, and wondered what happens when the weights are truths. Adrian thought of how quickly a tone can sour and how much skill it takes to keep a room kind. Back home, they curled around each other because affection is a practice and practices are strong. She slept in increments, he slept through, dreaming in clean lines. In the morning, they made eggs with comic overpoliteness, kissed goodbye with the softness that says we're fine, and went to their separate days wearing smiles that did not deceive strangers. The wind had shifted, nothing had broken, everything had nudged. Sometimes that's all it takes. Chapter 8. Surface Tension. They tried for anchor and found choreography. A week of small recalibrations followed, calendar blocks labeled us, a rule about phones away at dinner, a plan to alternate who chooses the Saturday thing. The plans were good. The feeling remained slightly out of phase, like subtitles a fraction behind the movie. One evening she asked him to meet her on a pier where the river pretends to be the sea. He arrived in that handsome, composed way of his, coat catching the last light. Is this a confrontation? He asked lightly, trying to pre-disarm. It's a conversation, she said. They leaned on the railing, water shouldered by, indifferent and instructive. I like us, she began. I like how we make rooms better. I like how we're kind. Me too, he said, relief eager to sign. And she continued, I need more than the polished version. I need the version where you tell me what hurts even if it makes the evening less pretty. I need to feel you risk awkwardness with me. He looked at the water. I don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm failing at care. Care includes risk, she said, gentle. Care includes letting the other person see the uncomposed take. He nodded, sincere and a little lost. I can try, he offered, the way some men offer to carry luggage that won't fit in the overhead. She smiled sadly. You'll try to make it look easy. Silence did its useful work. Seagulls did their useless commentary. I don't want to lose you, he said, first raw edge in weeks. You haven't had me, she said, not unkind. You've had my light. I want the part where we can sit in shadow and not call it a lighting problem. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. They stood that way while the river kept doing what it does, moving, reflecting, not deciding. He suggested counseling. She didn't hate the idea, but the suggestion sounded like velvet over cardboard. They walked back slowly. At her door, the goodbye was long and soft and honest. They did not sleep together. They didn't need the confusion. He kissed her forehead and then her mouth, a punctuation that meant gratitude and grief. The next morning, she wrote him a note, not a manifesto, just a page about being seen. She thanked him for the canopy he'd been and explained the sky she needed. She left it with the doorman, then went to the museum before opening hours, sat in front of a painting that refused to flatter anyone. He texted later, I read it, I care, I don't know how to be more than this yet. She replied, I know, that's why I'm stepping back. The word back did not mean never. It meant a true pause, a boundary that respected both of their wiring. She walked along the river at dusk, breathing the air she always chased. She was sad, she was clear. Surface tension holds water together, it also prevents sinking. She had learned to float between truth and fantasy, and now she chose the shoreline, not to dry out, just to stand, to feel ground. Behind her, the city practiced its beautiful surfaces. Within her, depth agreed to wait for someone willing to swim. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.